Hi, everyone. Good evening. So my name's Ellie Wyndham, and I'm the founder and program manager for Walking in Other People's Shoes. And we strive to empower women of color by providing transformational experiences through storytelling and community. We do events like this to share different cultures and highlight women of color authors. And then we also have other programming that helps to work through your voice through different facilitated workshops. So Mia is how I met through my blog, Walking Other People's Shoes. I asked her to be a blogger, and that's how I got introduced to the world of children's books, and especially with multicultural children's books. So, and that's how we started the book club. And Mia Wenjen blogs on parenting, children's books, and education at pragmaticmom.com, and is a co-creator of Multicultural's Children's Book Day, a nonprofit celebrating diversity in children's books. She's based in the Boston area. And however, she's not able to make it. So we have a guest host, Leanna, and she is a blogger at All Done Monkey. And then we have a guest facilitator tonight, and her name's Sonia Adams. And Sonia Adams is an English studies educator, curriculum consultant, and writer from New York City. Her scholarship is centered on global literature, multiculturalism, and literacy studies. As an English language arts teacher and adjunct professor, Ms. Adams strives to instill a love of reading and an appreciation for diverse voices and experiences among her students. Ms. Adams facilitates professional development and community-based workshops. Ms. Adams has published articles and poetry in academic journals and blog posts for professional organizations like Words Without Borders and National Council for Teachers of English. Ms. Adams is currently at work on her doctoral dissertation and a project on global BIPOC children's literature. So we got like really great resources here. We got great women who's really in the world of literacy. So we're really, really happy to have you. So I'm going to have Leanna to, host you guys, and I hope you guys learn and enjoy tonight as well. You guys can follow us on Instagram or Facebook or LinkedIn, Walking Other People's Shoes. So enjoy the evening.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here with you tonight. And I was telling Ellie before, I can't believe that I haven't joined in before, but I have it on my calendar so I can do it from now on. This is such a wonderful event. And I am, if you can tell, I'm here in California. It is still daytime. So greetings from sunny California. And also, especially since it's Native American Heritage Month, I want to mention I am coming to you from tribal land of the Nisenan people, the Southern Maidu, the Miwok, and the Patwin Winton peoples. And I'm excited to talk to you about this month's book, which is great for Native American Heritage Month or any time of year. It's We Are Still Here, Native American Truths Everyone Should Know. And it's by Traci Sorell. It's illustrated by Frenae Lassac. And it's a companion to another picture book that they did together, which is called We Are Grateful. And that was a multiple award-winning book. But Ms. Sorell has written a number of other books that I want to mention before we get into this one. She's written Powwow Day, Classified at the Mountain's Base, which are all picture books. And yes, I love Grateful. It is a wonderful book. Thank you for saying that. I didn't know before I started prepping for this that she also has written a middle grade novel, which is called Indian No More. So I'm really looking forward to checking that one out. But she also has at least 4 other books on the way, according to her website. So she's got 2 coming out in 2022, and then 2 more in the works for after that. So we have that to look forward to. But this is the one we're going to focus on tonight. Make sure you can see that. We are still here. And I love it because the title gets your attention right away. We are still here is really the main message of the book, that Native American peoples are not just, you know, kind of that worn old stereotype that they're from the past, that they're part of our history, when in fact they're thriving today. And books like Ms. Sorell's really help bring them to the forefront of the narrative. And so it's a nonfiction book, and it really goes into the different issues that Native Americans have faced, the Native nations have faced today, and also in the past, although a lot of the issues from the past are still ongoing today, still affecting them today. But the framework of it is a story. And the story is that it's Indigenous Peoples Day. And so the students at a school are having to do presentations, as a lot of students do. So here you can see them all gathered up going into their school. And here they are brainstorming. Let me see so you don't get so much glare on there. They're brainstorming what their topics are going to be and signing up for it. So these are the students. And as you go through the book, each student is presenting on their topic that they've chosen. And then when you get to the end, you see the community gathering and getting to see all of their presentations. And so, like I said, it has this story framework, but it really is nonfiction. And one of the things I love about it is that it really expands our idea of what a picture book can be, because I think a lot of us still have the idea that picture books are for little kids, and they really aren't. I mean, my older kids also enjoy reading picture books, and this one you can see how much text there is here. This is really packed with a lot of information, although the way she presents it is really easy, I think, for kids to digest. Like she really gets into legal issues and what's the specific legislation that has affected Native nations, but she breaks it down in ways that, you know, are easy for them to understand. Like here she'll have the topic, a little introduction, and then she'll have several points of what are the takeaways that we can get from that particular issue or that particular legislation. So it's really well done. But I could see if you're in a classroom or a homeschool setting that you could get like a different lesson out of each one of these pages. I mean, there's just so much here. And there's even more at the back. There's a really great timeline that actually goes on for several pages. There's more detailed information about each one of the topics that she has here. So it would be great for different levels, you know, depending on how in depth they wanted to get into it. But, you know, it's interesting. So she is a registered citizen of the Cherokee Nation, and she actually has a background in law, which you can really see as you're reading this. That really comes through because she actually helped write legal codes. She wrote testimony for congressional hearings, federal budget requests, grants, and reports to support Native communities. And so she really knows her stuff, and you can really tell that as you're reading this. And so I thought what I would do, I'm trying to keep an eye on the time, but I thought what I'd do is I'd read a little bit from the introduction. I'm going to skim it just for the sake of time, but I really recommend to go back and read this introduction. I think it's actually really good for adults. It's a really good overview, and I think a great way to kind of frame all of it. So like I said, I'll just read a little bit, and then I'll show you just a sampling of the issues that she goes over.
Excuse me.
Yes.
Could you spell her last name for me, please?
Yes, it's Sorell. I don't know if you can see it here. Traci, just with an I, Sorell, Sorell.
Thank you.
Thanks for asking. And so I'm just going to read a little bit from the introduction. It says, our Native nations have always been here. We are indigenous to the continent now called North America. Our leaders are sovereign and have power to make rules. Our ways of life changed when white people arrived from Europe. I'm just going to skip ahead a little bit. Some treaties forced Native people to leave our homes and sell the land where our ancestors lived. The United States government made promises to Native nations and almost 400 treaties altogether. The federal government did not always keep its promises. Most of the time, their laws and policies have been devastating. Most people do not know what happened to Native nations and our citizens after treaty making stopped in 1871. So, oh, thank you for putting that in the chat. So, and then we are still here. So that refrain from the title, we are still here, is repeated throughout the book because that really is the main point that she's trying to get across. So this is one, I know you can't really see the writing very well, but this is allotment. And this is one of the kids' presentation. And I also just want to show you
What's that? No.
is they really get at the diversity of the Native nations, even though the federal legislation really affected so many different communities, they really are very diverse. And so you get that, especially in the illustrations here, and like I said, there's actually more details about what each of the illustrations represents. This one is a Mandan family. That's a group that's in present day North Dakota. So you see here, this is allotment. White people wanted to control and sell even more of our tribal lands. Native nations had already given up larger pieces of land for smaller ones in treaties. In fact, the United States passed laws that divided up the remaining allotted lands of many tribes, gave a certain amount of land to each tribal citizen, sold the leftover land to white settlers and railroad companies. In spite of all of this, Native nations say, we are still here. So you see how she kind of gives a really nice breakdown with kind of bullet points of what to get out of it. And always, we are still here. I'm just going to jump ahead a little bit. This is getting into the 1960s with tribal activism. If you're familiar with Alcatraz Island and the takeover that took place in the 1960s, that's what this illustration is about. We actually got to go to Alcatraz Island this past summer, and they have a really great exhibit. It's they were celebrating the 50th anniversary of the takeover of Alcatraz, and they had a lot of firsthand accounts of what happened. But this is Jesse's presentation on tribal activism. It says Native citizens continue to speak up, organize, and increase our long-standing commitment to strengthen tribal sovereignty. With our collective voice and presence, Native nations say, we are still here. So again, and I'm kind of skimming over this just for time because there's so much information here. Is another on language revival. And one of the points that I want to make is even though this is covering a lot of really difficult topics, one, she makes it easy for kids to understand, but also in the end, it's a really uplifting book. It's very affirming because it's saying, despite everything they face, here's how they've dealt with it. So, you know, it doesn't present Native nations as being victims of all of the things that have happened, even though so many things have been done to them. She really shows how they've dealt with it and also what they're doing now in their communities, and also how they've actually prompted a lot of legislation that protects Native rights. And then here you can see protests and a lot of that they've actually gotten a lot of laws passed in Congress in response to things that have been done with them, excuse me. So it's a really great book. I really recommend it. And I am just going, and we're really lucky that she's going to be joining us later. I can't wait to see what she's going to talk about, but I am going to jump over. Yeah, she's going to be here. She's going to be coming in a little later, but I do want to switch over and talk and show a video from Mia, because, you know, you guys always do a giveaway every time. And since she couldn't be here, but she actually had all the goods that are going to be given away, she has a little presentation she did for us. So I'm just going to share my screen so you can see that.
Hi, I'm sorry I can't be here today for Multicultural Children's Book Club, but I'm visiting my daughter in college for Parents Weekend. So I just wanted to go over the giveaway really quickly. The first, of course, is the book, We Are Still Here, Native American Truths Everyone Should Know by Traci Sorell, and it's illustrated by Franny Lissac. And I actually purchased it from Multicultural Bookstore and Gifts in Northern California, which is a fantastic, diverse bookstore. And also they will take your order and mail it to you. So I really had fun researching and buying Native American products. I found a list on the internet, and then I just went through everything I could find that I could mail. I purchased. So the first is this choke cherry jam. It's from Nation Foods, Red Lake Nation Foods, and it reminds me of blueberries crossed with cranberry. So it kind of has a cranberry texture, but it's not as tart. It has kind of a blueberry flavor. It's absolutely delicious. The second is this Native American herbal tea, TP Dreams. This is 12 tea bags. It's all herbal, no caffeine, and it's perfect for relaxing, especially at bedtime. And then I got this, which I'm still eating. This is Swamanete chocolate rose hips. It's a plant-based bar. It's kind of like an energy bar, and it has nuts and rose hips, and I think it's just great. It's a great healthy snack. Then I got this tonka. I don't know if you can see it. Buffalo meat with cranberries. So to me, this is sort of like what I believe pemmican would be like. And so I have 4 of these bars. And I tried them. I thought they were really good. It reminded me of like beef jerky, but it's not as like hard and chewy. It's like softer. And then there's the cranberries in it, which give it a little bit of sweetness. So it's a little bit like if beef jerky had a baby with like meatloaf. That's how I would describe it. They're very good though. Also a really good healthy snack. And the last item is this candy. It's from Passamaquoddy Maple, and these are maple drops. And these are just like hard candy. So I have 2 bags of them. It's made out of pure maple syrup, but honestly, the flavor is not as strongly maple syrupy. It's just more like almost like a little bit vanilla. But it's a really pleasant hard candy. It's perfect if you have a sore throat, you know, or like a tickle and you just want to keep your throat lubricated, or just like hard candy, just, to give to your kids or to enjoy. And so this is my Native American giveaway to celebrate Indigenous People Month. And I hope you guys enjoy the rest of the presentation. And enjoy these snacks. When I get back from Chicago, I will mail out this package to the winner. So thank you again, and I will see you next month in December.
It all looks really wonderful. Whoever wins the giveaway is gonna really enjoy all of that. And now I want to pass it over to Sonia.
Okay, good evening, everyone. And before I begin, I want to personally thank Ellie and Mia for inviting me to present on this amazing book. I also want to thank the author, Traci Sorell, for sharing resources for me and also providing meaningful feedback. I also want to acknowledge the illustrator, Traci Sorell, for creating such illuminating images. And so I'm really grateful for the work that they're doing to contribute to sharing such important literature with children as well as adults. So my presentation is entitled Culturally Relevant Learning of Native American History and Heritage, Learning Activities for We Are Still Here. So I framed this presentation under culturally relevant pedagogy and learning. And culturally relevant pedagogy is highlighting culture as part of students' learning across the map. So it's not just learning in different subject areas, but just lifelong learning, making it relevant to their lives, also allowing children to see themselves, their identity, their heritage reflected in the literature that they read. So I hope that these learning activities that I'm going to highlight this evening is relevant not only of, or representative not only of Native students, but that children who are non-Native can learn and make valuable connections with the book. So what I'm showing you on this slide is a map of Native nations, and this was featured in an article by Quinn Smith Jr. And so before European colonial conquest of Native nations, there were over 810 Native nations in this continent. And so when the European settlers came to the continent, they took control and disrupted Native life as we know it. But however, in spite of that, we still have thriving Native nations today. And so there are over 510 now existing. And so in reading this book, this picture book, there were many topics, as Leanna had mentioned in the pages that she selected and read. But the ones that stuck out most poignantly to me is colonial conquest, assimilation, and activism. So with regard to colonial conquest, the author talks about the conquest of Native nations, particularly tribes, the tribal land, which was so vital and important to the Native nations, as well as laws that were established that exploited Native peoples through particularly treaties. With regard to the lesson on assimilation, we're going to learn about assimilation used through education, through Western education, particularly at Indian boarding schools. Also, social values. So as Native peoples were being assimilated, they weren't encouraged to practice values that were essential to their particular tribe. They were encouraged to practice Eurocentric values, social values, how to interact with other people, populations, how to carry themselves, a certain posture they had to have. And also culture. They were discouraged from practicing their religion and practicing certain ceremonies that were central to their tribes. So under assimilation, those things were silenced or suppressed. And activism. And it's important to note that the author uses this book as a form of literary activism, where she is highlighting facts that is documented. If you get a chance to read the book, there's an author note in which Ms. Sorell talks about the importance of truth-telling and also presenting facts that are applicable for students to learn across different grade levels. Also, Leanna had read from the protests at Alcatraz. So protest marches were very important to Native activism. Also, these characters in this picture book, this class, each student is offering a presentation on a different topic. And so sometimes students don't realize that what they're doing through giving presentations, through participating in different school programs, that those things can work as activism, where they're teaching others about history, culture, about values that are important to the building of this country. So that's something that stuck out to me as well. And so I created a lesson unit called Native Americans in U.S. Schooling. So basically this unit will focus on Native students' education in U.S. schools from the past and present, right? So what's interesting about this unit is that it could apply to English language arts. It could also apply to social studies disciplines as well. And so two sections that I highlighted for this unit would be assimilation and language revival, because they're both connected to Native students' education in U.S. schools. So it's important to note that Native students today Still, some attend boarding schools, but others attend public schools. Others attend private schools, right? So it's important for children who are non-Native to understand that Native students are not that different from them. They may have distinct tribal values that may be foreign to non-Native students, but there are commonalities that they all share, right? So that's important to highlight. Also, in terms of the time frame for this lesson plan, it could be done from 2 to 4 class sessions, 30 to 40 minutes per session. So it's up to the instructor how detailed they want the each lesson. Focus on these different sections from the book, how long they want to do it, how far they want to expand on it. So it's really up to the instructor to figure out how to approach it. But I hope that these learning activities would be something that instructors can build on. And so this image on the right is a marker for Sherman Indian High School. And so if you see, it's a very unique image of a side profile of a Native with traditional hair garments placed under hair. Very interesting, very, very beautiful. And so here on the right, I have the grade levels. So these learning activities can range from 1st grade to 5th grade or 6th grade. And so the learning objectives are to teach students about Native students' experience in U.S. boarding schools from the late 19th century to the early 20th century. Also to teach students about Native students' learning experience in U.S. schools today. That's important. So it's not just giving students this meek history, of this difficult history from the past, but also to show the resilience of Native students today. Also, students will be able to learn and apply important vocabulary that's highlighted about Native history and heritage from the book. And also that mantra, "We are still here." So students can learn about it and to expand their learning on it. And also in this unit, students will be able to make important textual connections, text to self, text to world. And so materials that the instructor can use for this lesson unit is a word wall, where they highlight important vocabulary terms from those 2 sections that I highlighted, language revival and assimilation. And also, depending on the grade level, the teacher could, simplify the definition so that younger children could be able to better understand what it means and understand its context. Also, in We Are Still Here, there's a glossary of terms that the instructor can use to introduce students to in presenting this vocabulary for the word wall. A signboard with the mantra, "We are still here." That's important because it would inspire students that they can be just as courageous and know that in spite of hardships that we go through today in life with COVID-19 and a series of other challenges, that we are still here, we are still surviving. So that's very inspirational. And also picture prompts that I'm going to highlight in this presentation. The map I showed earlier, and also I'm going to show a historical black and white photograph of Native students at boarding school, and current photographs with the author Traci Sorell with Native students and a student display board. And also I'm going to highlight the PBS cartoon series, Molly of Denali. Okay, so if you notice here, we have 2 black and white photos that are cast side by side. If you look at the left photo, there's an image of 3 Native young men. They're dressed in their, traditional tribal clothing. They have beautiful feathers in their hair, beautiful animal skin wrap. And then on the right, those same students, you won't be able to recognize them, but it's the same students that are captured on the left side, the photograph on the left side, a very stark contrast. And so this caption reads, wounded yellow robe, Henry standing bare in timber yellow robe, and after their Pennsylvania boarding school gave them proper clothes and haircuts. So we see assimilation taking place. On the left, we see them in their traditional garb, and then we see them in westernized or Eurocentric clothing. Their appearance has changed. Their hair is cut, and in Native American culture, hair is a sign of strength. But we see that is being controlled, and their demeanor. We see it seems like they're very stern, somewhat rigid. And in a lot of the boarding schools in the late 19th to early 20th century, they evoked a military style discipline and a mode of functioning in these boarding schools. So it's a very culturally assimilated, socially assimilated process that a lot of Native students went through at that time. But we are still here. And so we're going to see this current image of the author, Traci Sorell, in the middle amongst some Native students at a school. And so, it's taking place now. They have a lot of educational resources hanging in the background, but it's important to know that Native students are thriving and that they are being affirmed in what they're learning in school. And so here are some areas, some lessons that Native students are learning in school today. They're learning about Natives in US history, and these things are highlighted in the book. I mentioned European colonial invasion, Native activist movements, and also the boarding school experiences of the past, right? They're also learning about their heritage. Their Native identity is being affirmed for the first time in school. So it's not a sense of shame, but it should be a sense of pride, right? They're learning about tribal or intertribal values, the connection to tribal land. So they're learning about those things. Also, their culture, the ceremonies are being practiced, their religion is being affirmed. They're learning stories, songs, and also in the book, there's a presentation on language revival. So a lot of schools are introducing Native language programs, right? So where Native speakers could come in and teach the students the languages, the Native languages. So that's so very important. And so here I just have a video of the PBS cartoon series Molly of Denali that was established in 2019, and it centers on a character named Molly, who is a native in the fictional town of Kaye, located in Alaska. So she's a vlogger, and in the beginning of each episode, she shares with viewers what she's learning in her life experiences. She's also sharing aspects of her community and culture with viewers. So in season 1, episode 1, there's a cartoon called Grandpa's Drum, which focuses on Molly learning about her grandfather's experience in boarding school. And so, if you notice in the image in the video on the left, there's a boy and a girl. The boy is the grandfather at a younger age. If you notice, there's a color contrast, so it's evoking his experience in boarding school in the past, right? So there's some sources listed at the bottom that I provided, 2 links to the Molly of Denali education collection, and also there's a PBS website focused specifically on Molly of Denali. So their interactive activities, their videos, their games, virtual games. There are also downloadable activity sheets that kids could do on their own, and parents could share those resources with their children. Okay. So here is a learning activity. So this is geared toward grades 2nd and 3rd grade. So so the assimilation section would be ideal for this, as well as the language revival as well. And so this learning activity consists of 5 parts. In the beginning, there's a word wall. And so they're going to learn about those important vocabulary words. And so they're going to use one to create a sentence that focuses on a problem that they're learning about Native students at boarding schools in the past. In section 2, they're going to provide the definition of the word in addition to the part of speech. Section 3, they're going to come up with a sentence that provides a solution to that specific problem that they wrote about in section 1. And then section 4 is an illustration section where they're going to draw a picture that represents the problem as well as the solution. And so they will be encouraged to play with colors and shapes and text and speech bubbles. So they're encouraged to also include the signboard, "We are still here," right? Again, Native peoples are people who are still surviving in spite of. So that's important for students to take away from this activity. So that mantra, I want to highlight a quote from Ms. Sorell's author's note. She says, "Despite all that has occurred since Europeans arrived on this continent, Native nations proclaim we are still here because we have survived." And so this mantra is it's very important. It shows that they are proud. Native people are proud of who they are. It also shows that they have courage and they have the will to survive. And so this next activity is focusing on the essence of "we are still here." So this activity would be a display board, and it will focus on Native students in US schools in current times. And so students will be responsible for writing responses to some prompts that I listed here. They're also going to be encouraged to create their own image or collage within the display board. So the left section has some prompts that they're going to write their responses and put it on the display board. The middle section would have the image that they create, and the right section will also have their responses. And so this activity is centered on text to world. And so I'm just going to show a physical representation of this display board, what it should be, how it should appear. And so at the top of the display board, they would write the topic. And again, their responses would be on the left side and the right side to those prompts, and their image would be in the middle. And so this is a picture of a display board that Ms. Sorell had shared with me that a student created. So if you notice, there are some items that are added to this display board at the bottom, which has moccasins on the shoes, arrows, and there's a little basket with some items in there, and it's very colorful. It has a lot of images along with text. So it shows, again, the emphasis of that mantra. And so my last activity here is the "We Are Still Here" Venn diagram. And here, if you notice, there are 3 sections. On the left, it has Native students' experiences in US schools, both past and present. On the right, you have students' experiences in schools. So that student's going to write about his or her past and present experiences. Right in the middle is where students are going to reflect on their experience as well as Native students' experiences, and think of some "We Are Still Here" strategies for making learning fun and for all students at school, right? So it's going to require some critical thought and reflection. In this activity, it engages text to self as well as text to world connections. And so here's some recommended resources at the end. There's a blog post on cultural responsive strategies. There's also information on the creator of Mali of Denali. Also, We Need Diverse Books, which is an initiative to promote ethnic diversity. There is on the website, there is a feature on Heart Drum, which is a new children's book imprint by Simon & Schuster. And in there has a video by the editor of the main editor of this new imprint. And NACA's Inspired Schools Network, which Ms. Sorell shared with me, and also the article that had the map that I included in this presentation. So thank you all for your attention, and I hope that this presentation was informative for all of you. Thank you so much. And so I'm going to stop sharing.
Sonia, thank you so much. That was such a well thought out learning activities for and extension activities and really diving into the issues that Ms. Sorell brings up. And speaking of which, Ms. Sorell is actually with us now. She's just joined in. Hello, thank you so much for being here.
Wado, thank you for the invitation.
Thank you so much. Please go ahead.
I'm delighted to be here and to join you all this evening. Thank you, or Wado, Sonia, so much for sharing the book and all of those resources and photos and things. My hope is, and there are more resources at tracisorell.com. You just click on the books page there on my books. There's a teacher's guide. There's all kinds of other things. And certainly any interviews I've done about the book, other materials about my work with the illustrator are there for you too. My hope with the book, as I know Sonia shared with you, is that we stem the tide of ignorance and that, you know, we're helping our young people be better and more informed community members than we have been ourselves. And one way to do that is to give families, give teachers, librarians, etc., more options than what they find in the curriculum or on the shelves to fill in those essential gaps. And we see that not just with Native nations, but certainly with a host of other communities as well. But in my time and background as a attorney, a first-generation college graduate studying Native American studies, I knew things that had happened to the Cherokee Nation. I didn't know all of our history, but when I looked at, there were these larger systems in play and things were happening to a number of tribes that hadn't even happened to mine. I was like, wait a second, why haven't I learned any of this? Why am I having to be a paying college student? So really this book comes from a desire for our people at younger ages to know this and to be able to, like I say, navigate their lives in whatever they do with much more knowledge and understanding than what we had as young people, for sure.
And did anyone have any specific questions? We have Ms. Sorell here with us, so did anyone have any questions for her? We were just earlier, I can tell you, we were going through and we looked at some of the sections in the book and the different presentations. I was wondering, was there one particular issue in here that maybe is especially dear to your heart, or something that that's really important to you out of all of those?
I think, you know, again, kind of coming from an educational perspective, if you think about, you know, certainly the issue of assimilation is very much still with us. Like there's constantly policies coming out that want us to not be sovereign, not, you know, be exercising our culture, et cetera. So when you think about, you know, the assimilation one where children are being taken from their families and being raised in an institution where they can't speak their language, they are alienated from their culture. And then you look at the more contemporary reality, which is tribally run classrooms and others where language revival is happening. Those are two things I love to see juxtaposed, that it's like there has been some ground made. Does there need to be a lot more? Yes, because of course the pandemic has sped up the loss of first language speakers in all Native communities, so because until we had a vaccine, we lost a lot of folks in the first year. And so that is something that I loved in the book, was just thinking about, yes, we are in a place where young people are learning the language, and there are federal programs that help tribes with funding for those kind of things when they were actively working to keep us from speaking our languages.
And I believe you, if I remember correctly from your Instagram, you've been doing classroom visits, and I think just recently, I believe, did a visit at a Cherokee school. Is that? Could you talk to us more about getting to do those kinds of visits? That must be really special for you.
It was wonderful because, I have been like performing to the camera like most authors for quite a while now. And so it's especially hard with this book and Classified, which came out in the spring, because I couldn't, be in the classroom. I haven't been able to share those in person with people. So a few weeks ago, the Cherokee Nation has an immersion school from K through 6, where the students learn and speak Cherokee all day long. And then in 7th and 8th grade, it transitions to English with 1 hour of Cherokee to get them ready for the high school. And so I was able to meet with the 3rd grade who had already read this book. And what I didn't realize, though, and I knew that they had read it, and so I was of course going to come in and do my presentation in English, because I'm not, fluent enough in Cherokee to do an entire presentation about my writing life in our language. They had all done trifolds of each of the 12 topics that, they looked at how it related to them as a Cherokee person, or it related to our larger tribal community. And I almost burst into tears. It was so hard to keep it together because I had not anticipated that at all. I knew that they had read it and I thought we would talk about it, but that they had already in 3rd grade looked at, and the image that Ms. Adams shared with you, that young boy in the class, he looked at the issue of religious freedom and how that's expressed, and going to the ceremonial grounds, the use of cedar, having the moccasins that he wears, to go dancing, etc. I was just like, this is fantastic, right? That's what you want, is for young people to look at, whether they have a personal identification with it or not. Maybe for young people who aren't from a tribe, they're thinking, okay, whose land do I live on? How have these policies impacted them? Let's look at maybe one policy, or we all divide up and look at different ones. What's the reality of that? What is the reality of that Native nation that used to live here that may have been removed? The Cherokee Nation, and that's where I'm coming to you live from right now. The Cherokee Nation, we're in what is now called northeastern Oklahoma. But our reservation, is here now, but that's not where we're originally from. So many, many Native nations have been displaced from their original lands. And so children might be like, oh, well, there's no tribes where I'm at. Maybe there are tribes near you, but you're living on someone's land. So who lived there before? And I think it's a good exercise to realize that these policies are very much, we still, because I had 2 school visits this afternoon with classes in Oregon. I got asked by students like, well, are we still dealing with the effects of like termination and relocation that were mentioned in the book? And I said, absolutely. I said, over 2/3 of Native people live outside of their homelands, well over 2/3. And I said, some of that, of course, comes from earlier removals, but a lot of it comes during the 1950s. When the termination policy is passed by Congress and signed by President Eisenhower, and the federal government also passes an Indian Relocation Act. So they're moving people out of their homelands into cities, saying, oh, this is going to be wonderful. We're going to give jobs and education. They just became poor people who lived in rural areas who could live off the land, right? Be in their community with people, and put them in cities where you have a much more difficult time securing food and housing and all of those things in an environment that isn't set up for that, right? You need to have money. You need to have access to other resources to obtain those goods. You're not going to have a plot of land. You're not going to be able to go out and forage for food like you would at home, and go gather game or go fishing, again, plants that naturally grow that you're used to eating, in addition to whatever you may produce in your garden or raise, chickens, etc. So that's, it was a great question, and one that I want, I hope students understand that it's like all of these things. That's why there's not really a timeline, within the book, because some of these policies continue today. At the very beginning of the pandemic, the Mashpee Wampanoag folks in Massachusetts, that, Native Nation had to go to federal court because the federal government at the time was saying, we don't want to recognize you as a federal tribe anymore. And so we're going to take your land. Now, thankfully, they went to federal court and they managed to save their land and not have that happen. But I mean, that's in 2020. So it's not like this stuff is just in the past. I couldn't say, oh, well, that was just during this time frame, because this stuff is happening now. I'm heartened by this administration having a tribal leaders summit with the White House, which had been happening for many, many years. And that's happening again in a couple of weeks. It'll be virtual, of course. But that dialogue between Native nations and the US government on that government to government basis is critical, because we start having policies come up that are detrimental to us exercising our sovereignty and being able to take care of not just our citizens, but the majority of tribes are also employing a lot of people around them. And so they're a critical part of any community that they're near. Yeah.
What kind of response have you gotten from students? I mean, you mentioned some of the responses, or either from students or from other groups where you're presenting.
I've had a lot of students say, I never knew this. This is like the overall response. I'm like, I know, and I know that the adults, sharing the book with you don't know any of this either. So my hope is that like I say, we move from less of like, I never knew this, to I want to know more, because it is this book, the reason that I wanted it to be a picture book. And when I talked to my editor about it, because she said, what do you want to write? And I said, I want to write an entry point book that lets everyone understand, nothing stopped in 1871 when treaty making stopped. Diplomacy continued in different forms. And we have been here all along, and we have been, actively showing our agency, but that's not reflected in the curriculum. It's not reflected in books for young people. It's not even reflected in the mainstream media. And I don't want young people to constantly see us as these victims, or in most states, on their state testing, we just disappeared. We were killed off. And so after 1900, we're not here. And that's what a student gets right if they answer on the test. It's nuts to me. So I just, wanted an entry point that you could take and then give a student, that up next middle grade book, or the next, YA book that delves into more of Native history and policy. But I feel like regardless of the group, this is an excellent kind of way to just make that introduction and that overview that you can then go from and really do some deep dives, depending on the student's interest, your group's interest, the community's interest, a family's interest.
Well, it really is wonderful. And there is so much information. As you say, it really is a great entry point, because it gives so much information, and then resources where to find out more. I feel like there's so much more I could talk to you about, but I want to be respectful of your time, because I know it is almost 8 o'clock. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, everybody. I'm going to pass it back over to Ellie, because we do have our giveaway that she's going to announce. But thank you so much for being here. This is so special.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. You know, this was very insightful book. Because I obviously one of those people who don't know much, but I like it as an entry point for me to learn more. I know I've been to the Native American Museum here in New York City, and so it's and I learned about Friendship Day when I was there. So that's
a beautiful museum. That was that was my last public appearance before the shutdown. It was in February of 2020 there in New York.
It's I wish I tell people about it because they don't know it's there. So I always say this is like a great museum to go and learn about New York because, you know, we're in Native land. So so it has really great photos. I just was like fascinated of like, oh, the land looked like this before. It wasn't like what is like now. But so thank you so much for your time, Traci. Thank you, Sonia. Thank you, Leanna. We host every first Thursday of every month. We feature a book and of a woman of color, and we're so, you know, we get to learn about different cultures and different peoples and communities. So thank you so much. And tonight's winner is Kathleen. I will email you. Where are you in North Carolina, right, Kathleen? From North Carolina.
I think she was in Charlotte. Yeah.
Charlotte, yeah, she's in Charlotte. So we will be.
Yes, Charlotte. Sorry.
Yes, yes. So you'll be getting all the snacks
Yay!
and a book that of Traci's, and we are here. So. So thank you for coming, everyone. I hope to see you next month. The sign up for the next month is already in our link. So thank you, everyone. I hope you guys have a wonderful month and enjoy.
Thank you all.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.